my opinion, the joy, excitement and pride you get from seeing a player make their way through the youth system and go on to do well for the club is unique. Personally, I feel that as most of the money stays trapped at the top of the footballing pyramid, it has become more and more important for clubs who play in so-called lesser leagues to produce high-quality players from within. And beyond that, homegrown players help to maintain the identity, ethos and understanding of what it means to play for that club. As a Celtic fan in my lifetime, I've been lucky enough to see the likes of Sean Maloney, Aidan McGeady, James Forrest and Kieran Tierney rise through the ranks and become important players for the first team. Our current captain, the consistently brilliant Callum McGregor, has been at Celtic since the age of 8. But sadly, it is clear to see that something has gone wrong with the youth development at Celtic, and the assembly line has noticeably ground to a halt. Not since Tierney made his debut back in 2015 has a quality player broken into the first team. True, we have had a couple of squad players, such as Mikey Johnson, who I believe would be a first team regular today if not for his rotten luck with injury. And admittedly, it was great to see Tony Ralston turn his career round under Ange Postecoglou, but nowadays he is seen as nothing more than backup to first choice right back Alistair Johnson. Stephen Welsh has been in and around the first team for a few years, and despite the club seeming to say they consider him to be an important player by extending his contract and rejecting bids for him, their actions prove otherwise, as they continue to sign centre-backs who are above him in the pecking order. Adam Montgomery had a breakout 21-22 season and was mightily impressive on loan at St Johnstone last year. He looked to have improved as a player, and I fully expected him to come back and fight for a place in the first team. Alas, he was farmed out on another loan to Fleetwood, where he has only made 3 appearances off the bench. Although the number of academy products given first team debuts has held steady at around 2 to 4 a season since 2013-14, it's when we look at what has happened to these debutants that we see a worrying trend. Of the 26 players who have made their debut since the 2013-14 season, only 7 have gone on to make more than 10 league appearances for Celtic. Since 2017, only 5 of the 13 debutants remain contracted to the club, with 2 of these currently out on loan. And of those 5, only 3 have even managed to make a matchday squad in the last year. There have been 0 debuts for academy players so far this season, and I honestly couldn't tell you a player that looks to be in with a shout of breaking into the first team. So what's going on? Well, by taking a look at a few case studies, I will attempt to answer that question. What happened with Karamoko Dembele is when I started to feel that something wasn't right with how we were handling youth at the club. Dembele was born in London, but he and his family moved to Glasgow when he was just 1, and he joined Celtic at the age of 10. It was immediately clear that he was very gifted, with his pace and dribbling being levels above what is normally seen of players so young. Karamoko became a global sensation when he made his debut for the under-20s at the age of only 13, coming on for the last 8 minutes against Hearts and not looking at all out of place against grown men 7 years his senior in some cases. He quickly became a YouTube star, with compilations of his highlights racking up millions of views, with many feeling that Celtic had a truly generational talent on their hands. His progress within the youth setup was followed with great interest, and Celtic fans were generally impatient to see him make his debut and get a proper look at what the young prodigy could do. And on the last day of the 18-19 season, we got our wish. With a nice touch of poetic symmetry, he was brought on for the second half against Hearts, the same club he made his debut against for the under-20s, which catapulted him to stardom. Replacing Oliver Burke, he genuinely looked really good and was a real live wire on the right wing, as he linked up well with his teammates, played a couple of clever passes, showed his speed, skills and willingness to take his man on, and had a couple of decent cracks at goal. 6 days later, and he was an unused substitute for the Scottish Cup final. He even received a winner's medal for his troubles. It looked as if we would continue to see him appear in matchday squads and be given match experience as a substitute, but nothing. Apart from becoming the youngest ever player to feature for a Scottish team in Europe by coming on for the last 18 minutes of a 2-0 defeat to Cluj and a 5-minute run out against Ross County, he was nowhere near it. Neil Lennon just did not seem to fancy him at all, even saying this in an interview this year. He was definitely a very talented player, but he found it difficult to make the transition from the youth team to the first team. In terms of the training, he found it physically difficult. Honestly, I'm not sure how much I'm buying that at all. Sounds to me like Lennon is trying to find excuses for for messing up Dembele's development. Despite turning 18 during the disastrous 2021 campaign and in desperate need of match experience and minutes to ensure he would fulfill his potential, Lennon continued to snub the youngster, handing him only 2 appearances totaling just 15 minutes before his sacking in February. Caretaker John Kennedy was kind enough to bring him on for a run out in 3 post-split games, and it again raised more questions as he once more looked good, certainly no worse than the underperforming players that were given game time ahead of him. He even bagged his first goal for the Hoops, a fine angled strike against St Johnstone which showcased his good first touch and blistering pace. The cruel hand of fate then interfered in Dembele's story, as just when it looked like new manager Ange Postecoglou fancied him and was planning to include him in the upcoming campaign, he suffered a devastating fractured ankle against Bristol City, which kept him out for 3/4 of the season. When he returned, other players had firmly established their place in the new age of Ange, and Karamoko had no chance making a dent. He was also nearing the end of his contract with Celtic, and as far as I can gather, he wasn't even offered a new deal by the club, who inexplicably seemed content on letting what was one of the most sought after young talents on earth walk away for free. Personally, I feel they should have offered him a 2-year deal, with the intention on sending him out on short-term loan, preferably to another SPL side, to get him back up to fitness before giving him a real chance to prove that he was good enough for the team. Instead, they gave up on him, and he joined Brest on a free transfer, ending a 9-year association with Celtic. He didn't have the best of times in France, but he is now beginning to show what he can do at Blackpool, and it may well turn out that Karamoko Dembele goes on to be one of Celtic's biggest regrets of recent times. Celtic's high-profile and ultimately doomed pursuit of St Mirren's 17-year-old holding midfielder Dylan Reid in the summer of 2022 highlights the flaw in the current pathway for B-team players to break into the first team. A tough tackling midfielder who can pick a good pass, Reid was one of the most exciting young talents in Scottish football. He became the youngest to play for St Mirren at 16 years and 5 days when he made his debut against Rangers in 2021, and was top of the wish list at Celtic Park. Celtic had a £125,000 bid for him accepted by the Buddies in July, and pulled out all the stops to entice him, with Big Ange personally having a conversation with the lad about what it would be like to sign, what the plans were for him, etc. Dylan, however, felt that St Mirren was the best place to continue his development. He explained his thought process in an interview this year. At Celtic, I'd have been in their B team, playing in the Lowland League, and I didn't feel that would suit me, and I totally agree with him. The situation at the moment is that the B team get match experience in the Lowland League, the 5th tier of Scottish football, with the idea being that if they impress, they will get a chance at the first team. This has been the situation since 2021. This is simply not a high enough standard of football for youngsters to progress. Not only that, but this carrot of being able to break into the first team seems to be a myth. Players like Joey Dawson, Ben Quinn, Mackenzie Carse and Bruno Davidson have been tearing it up in the Lowland League, but apart from a few first team minutes here or there, they are in reality nowhere near it, and nobody seems to have either the willingness or a clue how to make this path easier for the young lads. On top of that, exciting talent has been brought in, like Jonathan Afolabi, Luca Connell or Liam Shaw. These were highly sought after, exciting young players who were getting significant minutes in the Championship in the case of the latter two, only to see their careers completely stagnate after signing for Celtic, with a series of poorly thought out loans, before eventually leaving the club having never played a single minute for the first team in most cases, and being left in the position of trying to resurrect a career which had been on the up before making the move to Glasgow. Both Afolabi and Connell are playing at a lower level than they were prior to signing for Celtic, and they are both showing that not giving them more of a chance in the hoops was a mistake, with the former becoming top scorer in the League of Ireland with Bohemians, and the latter being hailed as future captain material at Barnsley. This is really not a good look, and we can have no complaints if scenarios like the Dylan Reid debacle continue to play out. The case of Ben Doak calls attention to another major issue Celtic faced when developing youth. Doak had been in Celtic's academy for a while, and he was held in very high regard at all levels of the club. This was a player that they really had high hopes for, and they were keen to sign the electric winger to a long-term contract. Amid Premier League interest, Ange tried to convince him that Parkhead was the best place for him to develop. He was promoted to the senior squad, began training with the first team, and Postecoglou handed him his debut on the 29th of February 2022, bringing him on in the 68th minute against Dundee United. He caught the eye with his blistering pace and direct and fearless running at the opposition. 4 days later, and he was given the smallest taste of one of the biggest derbies in football, playing the final 9 minutes of Celtic's 3-0 mauling of Rangers at Parkhead. And then nothing after that, back to the B team. Maybe Ange had the feeling that he was planning to leave, and that's why he stopped picking him in matchday squads, because it wasn't actually for over a month or 7 games that he ended up signing with Liverpool. Personally, I think we could have done more to convince him, maybe even hand him a couple of starts in the league, because honestly, he looks like one of the best prospects to come out of Scotland in decades. Now probably some of you are right now thinking that there is enormous pressure to win every game at Celtic, and you can't just be starting 16-year-olds willy-nilly, and to that I would say, why not? There is also the expectation to never lose at Barcelona, Bayern Munich and Man City, yet they are able to play the likes of Lamine Yamal, Jamal Musiala and Rico Lewis. Maybe it would have come to naught, but I feel it would have been worth going all out to try and persuade him regardless. In the end, the pool of playing at Liverpool alongside the likes of Mo Salah under one of the best managers in the world was naturally too much, and seeing the way that Klopp has thoughtfully and patiently brought through young talents like Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott and Stefan Bajcetic, I can't blame him. As Ben himself explained, the level at Liverpool, a team that got to 3 Champions League finals in recent years, is incredible. It's the highest I've ever seen with my own eyes. It's a must to set the bar high for my levels. The other players' standards seem so high without trying sometimes because they're just that good. Or, as Jackie McNamara put it, he doesn't want to play against civil service strollers in the B team. And while I personally feel Celtic could have done more in this particular instance, ultimately, if a big club from a bigger league who can offer world-class teammates to train alongside and a higher level of opposition to test themselves against comes calling for a young talent, there is little that can be done to stop them. Owen Moffat joined Celtic in 2009 at the age of 7. A skillful and quick winger with a mop of curly red hair, there was always going to be comparisons with the legendary Jimmy Johnstone, and this was the case when Moffat stole the show in a pre-season friendly match against Sheffield Wednesday. The diminutive wide man scored in the eventual 3-1 win, putting in a dazzling man of the match display in what was Postecoglou's first match in charge of Celtic. However, this did not lead to regular first team involvement in the actual season, as he was more or less a permanent fixture in the B team, where he was a standout performer in the Lowland League, bagging 14 goals and 8 assists. An injury crisis in the first team over the festive period saw Moffat unexpectedly handed his competitive debut against Ross County on the 15th of December, finding himself involved in the build-up to Tony Ralston's dramatic and vital 97th-minute winner. 4 days later, and he replaced 2-goal hero Kyogo for the nervy final 7 minutes of the 2-1 Scottish Cup win over Hibs. 3 days later, and he was given his first start for the club, and he played well enough in a tough 0-0 draw away to St Mirren. Postecoglou then brought in Dyson Maeda in the winter window, and Moffat was not selected again. In the summer of 2022, Celtic were in need of some squad depth options on the wing, and Ange showed exactly what he thought of the academy and Moffat by dipping into the transfer market to bring in former West Ham flop Sead Haksabanovic on the 25th of August. 5 days later, and Moffat, clearly reading the message loud and clear, signed a 4-year deal with Blackpool. And while Haksabanovic wasn't a bad backup by any means, his 5 goals and 2 assists in 22 league appearances, 15 of which were from the bench, is surely a tally that young Owen Moffat could have equalled or even bettered. His smashing form in the Lowland League and decent showings in the first team the season prior surely should have earned him the right to try. A similar preference for taking punts on untested talent from untapped markets was shown this summer when both Marco Tilio and Hyun-Jun Yang were brought in, virtually ending any chances of academy players like Bruno Davidson or Ben Quinn ever making a bench. Rocco Vata is a player with Celtic in his blood. He joined the academy at the age of 7, and his father Rudy made 60 appearances for the club between 1992 and 1996. He's highly rated at Celtic and in his national setup, having represented Republic of Ireland at youth level since 2019. He is sought after by a number of clubs around Europe, and he has started this season absolutely on fire with 10 goals in 9 Celtic B team matches, as well as 2 goals in his Ireland under-21s debut this September. And in all likelihood, he will leave the club for a paltry 6-figure fee after his contract expires in 2024, as Celtic have once again shown a truly baffling level of incompetence in their handling of the Starlet. They missed out on the chance of receiving a significant fee more in line with his potential by rejecting bids from Torino, Nottingham Forest and others this summer. Yet Vata quite rightly has refused to sign an extension due to his growing frustration at a lack of first team opportunities. He made his debut in December 2022, coming on for the final 6 minutes of a 4-0 draw drubbing of Hibs and was given 3 more appearances totaling just 34 minutes at the end of last season. And he truly must be wondering what the hell he has to do to break into the first team, as scoring more than a goal a game in the Lowland League somehow isn't enough to see him considered above the summer signings. The one small glimmer of hope is that Daisen Maeda is set for a 6-week injury layoff, which could see young Vata named on the bench in the coming weeks. If we are to have any hope of keeping him, then we need to play him now. Otherwise, we're going to see yet another highly promising young player slip through our fingers. And there are more examples besides these which all add up to form a frustrating picture. As a fan, I can't help asking where the next homegrown hero is going to come from. Where is the next James Forrest, who can both score and assist over 100 goals for the club? Where's the next Kieran Tierney, who can generate a record-breaking transfer fee? Where's the next Callum McGregor, who can lead the club with honour and pride? Because the fact of the matter is that we continue to prioritise speculative signings over our own academy. The fact is that players can impress on loan and still not be given a chance when they return. The fact is that we keep allowing highly regarded youngsters to leave for next to nothing, or for free. Now, it could be that none of these players I mentioned are good enough to play for Celtic, although I don't think any of them has played enough first team football to make that assessment. But if that is the case, then it is in some sense more alarming that the richest club in the country can't produce a half decent footballer nowadays. So to answer the question, where's the next Callum McGregor? Well, he'll probably end up joining Blackpool on a Bosman.